resentment is unexpressed boundary energy, something that I want to protect that I didn't protect, or something that wants to be seen that I didn't name and bring.
Welcome back to The Experienced Way. I'm Matthew.
I'm Naomi.
And we're back with another relational reframe. As we discussed last time, the human experience is full of embodied sensations that we have concepts to describe and make sense of. And so, there's a particular embodied sensation that is called anger. And when we reframe anger to boundary energy, or maybe even a breakthrough boundary energy, we are able to sort of create some space between us and the sensation and provide a pathway for greater agency, greater responsiveness to the sensation. And so rather than, Naomi, I'm angry at you, it's, Naomi, I'm feeling some breakthrough boundary energy, and I need us to think about it because apparently we triggered one of my boundaries, and we need to negotiate how to respond to that. And so by reframing anger into boundary energy or breakthrough boundary energy, we have a clear pathway of how to respond to the sensation.
Yeah, and we covered this in our previous video. One thing that I think is always important to talk about when we talk about reframing anger is that it's not to take the fire out of anger. It is not to make it more polite. We're not trying to sanitize it. We're trying to preserve the fire and even embodying some of it in a way that is more collaborative, more empowering for both us and the people we're in relationship with.
Right. And so I could say, hey, Naomi, I'm noticing a little boundary energy. Or, Naomi, I am noticing a lot of boundary energy, and we need to talk about this right now.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah. And so in our last video, we talked about how we can reroute anger through this understanding of boundary energy that needs to express. And today we're here to talk about what happens when we have that boundary energy come up and we don't express it. And that thing that happens is often called resentment.
Yeah, that's also a sensation, right?
Yeah, I've experienced resentment as a sensation a lot. That involves a clutching in my stomach and a heaviness in my head and ruminating thoughts, thinking about someone and some situation. And
yeah, describe the thoughts a little bit of resentment.
Oh yeah,
because that's part of the sensation.
Yeah,
are the thoughts.
Yeah, so thoughts that have come up for me in the experience of resentment are things like, I'm working so hard. What about him? What about her? Why are they doing less? They're being less responsible, less responsive. They're not showing up the way that they should. I should slip in there a lot.
Like there's a way you should be treated.
Yeah.
And they're not doing it.
Yeah.
You're not naming it.
Right.
But they're not doing it.
Yeah.
And then that creates the sensation of resentment.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And this is a subject that I'm particularly passionate about because I, like many people, was conditioned out of noticing my boundaries and expressing my boundaries. It was unsafe in a lot of my childhood to really express my boundaries. And so not only did I stop naming them, I stopped even noticing them come up. And so something would happen, my body would be angry, it would have that boundary energy, and I wouldn't compute it. And I wouldn't say anything about it. And this happened in a lot of my relationships. But then when Matthew and I got together, I noticed that we'd spend this time together and we'd have times apart. And I would have thoughts of resentment coming up towards him.
Yeah.
And then knowing that resentment is unexpressed boundary energy, something that I want to protect that I didn't protect, or something that wants to be seen that I didn't name and bring. Knowing that gave me the ability to start bringing my to start first coming back to Matthew after I felt the resentment and be like, hey, so I felt this resentment come up earlier. I think I didn't express the boundary because of these reasons, and I want to talk to you about the boundary, and yeah, like got me to start collaborating. And it didn't always mean that the boundary was sort of just that what was coming up for me was what specifically we wanted to take on as our shared reality.
Yeah, in other words, it wasn't always finding fault in me.
Yeah.
It wasn't always something that I was doing, quote unquote, wrong. But there was maybe an action I was taking, or maybe an action I wasn't taking that bumped your boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And sometimes I didn't express those boundaries in the moment because I didn't feel like they were just. And so being able to notice the resentments and then bring them to Matthew to sort of figure out together and integrate together, not only staved off a lot of the resentment that came up, but then also down the line, after doing this a few times, I started to notice my boundaries in the moment they were actually happening. And so it helped unrepress boundaries for me.
Yeah. Yeah, because the way that we see it, oftentimes the experience, the sensation that we call anger, is what we would call breakthrough boundary energy. There's so much boundary energy that it comes out in like an obvious expression of anger, an angry face or angry words. Whereas resentment is sort of the pathway to break through boundary energy. It's unexpressed boundary energy. It's boundary energy that we don't notice or we don't feel empowered to speak to, but that still sort of shows up in the relationship because we have sensations, we have thoughts that we're not expressing, boundaries we're not expressing. And so we can't take any kind of responsive actions until we know that those boundaries are there.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, this reframe from resentment to unexpressed boundary energy also took the judgment out of it, not just for my companion or companions, but for myself. It was so easy to be like, oh, I'm being resentful. I'm being bad. I'm being petty. And this reframe allowed me to be like, oh, there's energy mobilized to express. And the energy is frustrated. Let me give this energy a pathway for expressing.
And the resentment itself is like data. At whatever we're feeling, whenever we're having sensations, whenever we're having emotions, that's data. I know that, speaking for myself, I was taught that certain emotions were wrong, or certain emotions I didn't have permission to feel under certain circumstances. And so not expressing when we experience these sensations of boundary energy, whether it's breakthrough boundary energy or boundary energy that we don't feel safe or empowered to express, that mean not having a way to talk about those experiences means we are depriving the relationship of data, of valuable information that we could otherwise respond to. I wish I could remember the specifics, but there have definitely been times, Naomi, when you came to me and said, I'm noticing resentment, I'm noticing unexpressed boundary energy. And you would bring it to me, and I would realize, I would understand what was triggering it. And maybe it was unintentional. And maybe it had nothing to do with what I was doing in the moment. Maybe it looked like a boundary violation that you had experienced previously, which is something that we recognize as trauma. When we've experienced patterns of behavior that feel bad to us, sometimes that experience of a bad feeling or bad sensation can be triggered by something that is not the same pattern,
But looks similar.
And still other times have been things I was doing that when Naomi brought it to me, I realized that I could make a small behavioral change that would relieve the experience of boundary energy that you were having. And so I think it's really critical that this be treated as a relational practice when we do it, when we bring unexpressed boundary energy to people or breakthrough boundary energy to people. It's not to punish or coerce or force some kind of behavioral change that's uncomfortable. It's meant to be a collaborative exercise of learning about each other's boundaries and the kinds of behaviors that make us feel safe with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's here as data to collaborate on. And one other thing I wanted to say about moving from resentment to unexpressed boundary energy. I forgot what I was going to say. So I'm actually going to offer the talking stick back up.
Well, this is actually a good time to practice something.
What's that?
Maybe we could just give you a second and see if it comes back to you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I thought I already took that second, but I'm in for taking another.
Yeah, let's just experiment.
Okay. Oh yeah. Man, somehow being permissioned to it like makes all the difference, even when I'm already doing it myself. So one thing we want to say is we're talking about anger being breakthrough boundary energy and resentment being unexpressed boundary energy, is that having boundaries in relationships is really hard. It's how to go about it is an entire video or series of videos that would be a good idea for us to do.
Yeah.
And we actually intend to at some point. And one thing I wanted to say is that when we first start relationships, it can take a while for our boundaries to sort of come online, for us to hit them together and feel them together. But then once we do, there can be a number of places where we're having dissonant perspectives with our companions. And depending on where someone's at and where a relationship is at, it can take time to kind of winnow down the boundaries. It may not be as simple as sharing a boundary for every boundary that comes up, so to speak. And so when we notice resentment coming up in relationships, for us, we've winnowed our boundaries, like we've gone through our boundaries enough that we can just talk about it in the moment because there's no backlog. But in other relationships, there are. Relationships are on different developmental arcs. And so the resentment isn't always a cue that like, okay, well, we better bring this boundary and this boundary and this boundary because that's a way to exhaust a relationship. But it's a cue to keep chipping away at having all of our authentic boundaries in a relationship.
Yeah, so I think part of what I hear you saying, Naomi, to just reflect it, is that there's a spectrum of development for learning to sense and recognize our boundaries and communicate them to our companions in a way that's safe for us and safe for our companions. And that itself is a relational developmental process.
Yes.
And so not everyone is at the stage where they can bring every unexpressed boundary to their relationship. Sometimes it takes time. Timing and dosage is important with these things. And even more importantly, I think for us, and the reason we're doing this video is to raise our awareness that these phenomena, these sensations that we have that have been named, the experience of anger, the experience of resentment, these experiences were named and described to us. We all inherited these concepts, these ideas of what it is we're experiencing. But they're just concepts. They're just concepts, and we can shift the concepts and develop greater awareness. And so once again, for us, we recognize that anger is a sort of breakthrough boundary energy. It's there to defend something that is important to us. Resentment, similarly, is unexpressed boundary energy that has not yet catalyzed a need to explicitly name the boundary. And so the call to action from this video would be something along the lines of, let yourself start noticing moments when you have the sensation that you associate with anger, or the sensation that you associate with resentment, and notice that anger might be breakthrough boundary energy, that resentment might be unexpressed boundary energy. You don't necessarily have to do anything with that awareness immediately. I think for now, we would invite you into the practice of just noticing those moments and thinking of them in those terms as a kind of boundary energy. And that gives you a little more agency in how to respond to those experiences.
Yeah, because it invites you to ask the question, what am I desiring to protect here? Mm-hmm. And that makes all the difference.
And what do I need to feel safe?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, given that we've shared the call to action, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I'm complete.
Well, I feel complete as well. Thanks so much for going on this journey with us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.